Hello and welcome to the Mavericast. I'm Andrew here along with Kyle,
Hey.
Sarah,
Hello.
and Aaron,
Austin.
There we go.
Hey.
All right, Austin.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself to the audience. Give us, name, major. What are your career aspirations?
Small bio about yourself.
What are your lifelong dreams?
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like that kind of thing?
Fair. My name's Austin Gray. I'm a freshman student here at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm currently in the school business, plan on transferring to engineering, more my thing. Where do I see myself in 5 years? Hopefully not here.
Fair.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And what political figure do you most align with? How would you describe your own political philosophy?
Oh, good God, what political fate? I honestly don't know
Like who
of
did
any
you
one
vote for?
individual.
Like in the primary.
In the primary, I actually voted Trump last minute. I really regret it. It's not like it would have made a difference.
Okay.
Pennsylvania went overwhelmingly for
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah, fair.
I would have voted Cruz.
In hindsight.
Yeah, in hindsight, I would have voted for
I
Ted
am.
Cruz.
I'm the lone Kasich supporter
Kasich
in
is
many
the worst.
circles, so I completely understand. So just some things that have happened. Did anybody watch the Bama versus Clemson game?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was very sad.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, I had to root for the ACC team. So
I just like watching one college football team just dominate college football year after year like Bama does.
Mhm.
So I think it's good for college football actually because eventually teams are going to have to actually be good enough to beat them, not like
Mhm.
lower the level of play.
I just like that we get to say that we beat the national champions. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of
Fair.
nice.
By the transitive property of the scores.
I mean, they
Yeah,
were
in fact,
both
actually.
collectively only lost to one team, and that one team is us.
True.
So,
It's for the best.
exactly.
the best, believe me. So how's everybody's semester going so far?
Thriving.
Well, I just got done gender class, so I mean, as good as you would expect.
I think that's
Really?
that's a perfect class to have before coming on the air.
For me, it's just math and science. I'm getting beat over the head with that, so it's something.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
Thank you.
All right.
Just read.
Yeah.
So, obviously, if you've been paying any attention, if you put on a TV at any point in the last 48 hours, I'm sure you saw highlights of the Sessions confirmation, the Tillerson confirmation, the Mattis confirmation, or even the Kelly confirmation. So we want to give some takes and some reactions. How many of you guys watched any part of the Sessions hearing?
I watched
A little bit,
of it.
yeah.
A little bit, but without
Yeah.
sound.
I can't just like before we get into like the nitty gritty part of it, the stamina that it takes to be in front of the committee for 8+ hours, I can't even imagine. Like,
Especially when you're the one answering questions
Yeah.
the whole time, it's just you. Like, I know there's been committees that have gone on for like 24 plus hours, but it's been like multiple, like 6 people on a panel almost answering questions, but it was just one person. It's unbelievable stamina. Just sit there and just take questions about yourself over and over again.
And then you can just see, like, you see the committee up there, but then you also see about 30 cameras
yeah,
right in front of their faces. It's
Yeah.
just impressive to be able to go on that long.
they're sitting right underneath the desk. Yeah, taking.
Poor guy.
And I'll give credit where it's due. I remember when Hillary went for the Benghazi hearings. I think she was in front of them for
That
12
was-
hours.
Yeah, 12 hours of hearings.
That's wow.
That's brutal.
And
Yeah.
there was multiple hearings too.
Yeah.
Anyone that can get through that, props to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Deserves some level of
I
respect.
mean, fair enough. She didn't say like one thing true the entire time, but like
But still.
she still
So
did it.
Yeah.
so back to Sessions. I know that he's being opposed by Cory Booker. It's the first time that a senator has actively testified against somebody being confirmed.
Cory Booker's making quite a fool out of himself
Mhm.
doing this. I mean, it's an unprecedented move in the first place, and the whole reason like you can't oppose him just through voting wise is because of your own party. So, I mean, it's entirely his fault.
Do you think this could potentially be a publicity stunt? To get more attention? Because I mean, I think everybody who's anybody knows that Booker's plotting a run in 2020.
Yeah.
This is his way to make a name for himself.
Because
Yeah.
and I'll be fair on our side. Like when Rand would give his 8-hour, 12-hour filibusters,
Yeah.
they were attention grabbers.
Same with Cruz. I don't
Yeah,
think, I don't
exactly.
Think, I think pretty sure Cruz is like underpinnings to why his 24-hour filibuster went so well. I mean, the only people that actually spoke in the filibuster, there were like 3 major people, which was him, Rubio, and someone else. I think they all ran
Yeah.
this year.
Mhm.
So, credit where credit's due. He didn't make a solid case for him, but I mean, Booker did stand up for, like, I guess, what his party does feel
Yeah.
with the guy.
Yeah.
And this was obviously a very partisan, divided confirmation, to say the least. to where there were a lot of praise being put on him, whether that's from especially Condoleezza Rice, who's from Alabama and knows Sessions well, Tim Scott from South Carolina, who knows him well. But when the question shifted to the other side, that's where we saw, obviously it was more hostile. Obviously they're trying to stop him to some respect. And I don't recall seeing this with any of Obama's appointees. I think, now, sure, Sessions may be farther right than some of Obama's appointees to the left, but this is a point where we should come together, where we should rally behind the person in their qualifications, you know.
Yeah, this kind of just fits with the spirit of this whole election cycle, and people are still continuing the fight far past where they normally would have stopped and said, all right, it's time to come together and actually get something done.
I mean, I think we have to look at this from a kind of shoe on the other foot perspective here. In 2012, when Obama was doing it, we hammered McConnell for not doing what the Democrats are doing now,
Sure.
actively going through and actually almost persecuting these people as they're trying to get confirmed into the White House. And we went after McConnell for a long time because of this. We call him spineless. We call him a weak leader.
Yeah.
And I actually give credit to the Democrats, especially Chuck Schumer, for how much they're standing up for their own principles and how much they're standing up for the party. I mean, I don't agree with them, obviously, but I do give them credit where credit's deserved, because if this was on the other foot, we'd be praising our guys in the same scenario.
Sure.
This election cycle has really brought out those who are principled in both parties, who are willing to stand up and actually fight for what they believe in.
So, did you guys see a lot of protesters were interrupting Sessions? I think more so than anybody else. There were Code Pink protesters. There were protesters who were donning Klan outfits.
Yeah, they were wearing Klan outfits.
Poorly constructed Klan outfits.
I mean, they don't want to look like the real thing. Somebody just gets the wrong look at them, takes them out on the street.
Yeah.
But it was surprising to me that Sessions was going to be the guy that we were focused on for that. For me, it would have been Tillerson, or even some of the lower generals that he had promoted that weren't Mattis. Those seem more likely targets.
That's a good segue. We can move over to Tillerson, because I think I think it went pretty poorly. I think his hearing went poorly. Yeah. And we've actually never detailed Tillerson on the podcast. So just to give a very short biography, CEO of ExxonMobil from 2006 to 2016. He spent 41 years at the company. He opposed sanctions against Russia in 2014 because of his business interests. And I thought this was interesting. He had never met Donald Trump until their first meeting together.
Yeah. Great.
I had qualms about the guy. I didn't think he had a great chance of getting confirmed anyways before the actual meeting, before the actual confirmation hearing, because I think it was either New York Times or Washington Post ran a story a week prior to the hearing that he had done illegal or unethical business practices, borderline illegal, when we were at certain economic ties with Russia, we weren't doing any business with them, and he had been doing business. So I thought that story had already destroyed most of his credibility when it comes to the business practice side. And now after the hearing, it's not looking good for him.
And I think especially, after he was given the Medal of Friendship from Russia, that should be a red flag for anybody. I have a quote from Politico that he'd hedged on questions about whether governments in countries such as the Philippines or Saudi Arabia were human rights violators. So these were countries that he's done business with before. And when Senator Rubio asks him, is Vladimir Putin a war criminal, Tillerson responded with, I would not use that term.
Yeah, he said he wouldn't use that term, and then he tried to explain himself in saying that, well, it's questionable based on individual circumstances, and Rubio just killed him with the look at Aleppo. Especially
when he's trying to get GOP senators on his side, that was probably one of the worst answers that I think he could have given.
Mitt Romney's looking kind of pretty right now.
Yeah. I agree with Sarah.
But I think the question we have to ask is, who does Donald Trump go to if Tillerson doesn't get in?
Will be Petraeus or Romney.
Yeah, I could see either one. Petraeus brings controversy to the table. I mean, because we did this at one point, probably a couple episodes ago, to where we detailed all of the 7 people in the running. I really hope it's Romney. I think that's where we kind of decided on. But I could also see Corker.
I would love Corker.
Yeah.
I love Corker more than I love Romney.
And then even Bolton to that end.
I like Bolton more than I like Romney, too.
So we'll be keeping tabs on this, and we'll see the developments as they come along.
Yeah. The thing with Trump is you really never know if Tillerson doesn't get picked, who he's going to go for. Because he has this habit of pulling people far out of left field, where did this person come from?
Mm-hmm.
But
And from what I understand, Robert Gates, who's in support of Tillerson, when he had a meeting with Trump, that was the first time that Trump had even considered somebody like Tillerson for the job because Gates had personally recommended him.
I mean, obviously, none of us.
Mhm.
Trump loves his list of people, like his Supreme Court list. Yeah,
Yeah.
he had a list of people he had in order, and he kept changing it.
White House
Yeah.
apprentice.
White House apprentice. We don't really know who his second guy was. The guy that was running
Yeah.
neck and neck with Tillerson. We
right,
assume it was Romney, since like that's the person he had the most like public meetings with.
Mhm.
But we honestly have no idea.
right,
Because I remember Petraeus was at Trump Tower for hours one day.
And people kept dropping up and down on the
Mhm.
list, like
Mhm.
day by day. So we have
yeah. His lists fluctuate.
Yeah.
It could be
you know,
changing
on an
right
almost
now.
It
hourly
could be Mike
basis.
Lee for all we know.
Yeah.
And do you remember on our very first podcast after the election where we were like, Rudy's going to be Secretary of State? Like, we didn't have a single, like, we
Yeah.
almost had no
Oh,
doubts.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. When Rudy
And now
was-
he's not getting anything.
Now he's not getting
Yeah.
anything. And I've said this to a lot of people, to where we have to give credit to Trump because he drained the swamp of his own support team
Mhm.
by having guys like Newt, Rudy, and Christie who were, corrupt is probably a good word to describe someone like Christie. I know Kyle does not
Yeah,
like
not a
Christie,
huge
and I
fan of
don't
Christie.
either. And I think we have to give credit to Trump because even though these people showed him loyalty, he filtered them out when the time came to do so.
I thought it was going to be very hard for him to get rid of Giuliani and end up doing it.
Mhm.
So I mean,
And
yeah.
the driving force behind getting rid of Christie was Jared Kushner, actually.
Okay.
And I know there's a bit of a history between Kushner's family and Christie, but regardless, there was a New York Times headline from the summer that labeled Kushner the quiet fixer in Trump's campaign. And that's why I'm very happy that he's been appointed to be senior advisor.
I thought his meeting went very well
Mhm.
with Trump.
Because Kushner, he's a very, very good, good brain, good head, as Trump would say. And from what I understand, he's skirting around nepotism laws because since he's an in-law to Trump and not a direct relative, the laws won't apply to him.
Yeah.
And so just to detail his background, he's a BA from Harvard and a Juris Doctor from New York University, excuse me. He's the owner of Kushner Properties and of the Observer Media Group, and he's the publisher of the conservative New York Observer in New York. And I'm told that he has gone on a bit of a political transition as well. That he started out, like a New York City elite, being liberal, having the right ties, but just being involved with his father-in-law's campaign and going out to middle America has really changed his beliefs.
Yeah, I've heard
Promising.
something similar to that too.
And I'm very happy as well because we're not big Bannon fans,
No.
and Kushner
Not
was
at all.
a balancing force to Bannon on the campaign trail. That he was able to be a more constructive influence and a moderating influence to Trump while in Bannon's place. So from what I understand, Bannon will be setting strategic and goals for Trump. Reince will be handling day-to-day activities, and Kushner will be focusing on Middle Eastern affairs, actually, and detailing foreign
Bannon
policy
doesn't have a
plans.
confirmation hearing, right?
No, neither does Kushner, and neither does
So I
Reince.
Okay.
So I was gonna say I was like a bit perplexed as to how.
How on earth Steve Bannon would get through?
Well, I was gonna say like
Yeah.
the Republicans don't want to oppose Trump too much, so they don't want to
Right.
vote down multiple cabinet picks.
Mhm.
So they're probably gonna have to pick one if Bannon was going to had a confirmation
And-
between Tillerson and Bannon.
And I think many probably senators in both parties may actually put up a fight if Kushner had to go through it because of nepotism.
Probably.
And so moving forward, who here saw a BuzzFeed article the
Oh.
other day?
Good God. I was reading through these claims just like, this is unbelievable. I was in shock. And, after the initial shock, I was like, there's absolutely no way that most of this is true, if any of it. Those were my gut reactions. And here we are, like, what? 1 day, 2 days later, it's already gone.
And to just furthermore, to talk about journalistic ethics,
Where do we begin?
to put something on your website so irresponsibly, without checking, without even, I'm told the font wasn't even similar, that the structure of the document wasn't even similar to what it would look like.
I don't think it was consistent throughout. No.
Mhm. One of my favorite responses was when Jake Tapper on CNN responded with saying that this story like this hurts us all. And I saw similar sentiments from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, the Guardian, even in the UK from the Guardian, that this is irresponsible and it's reckless to the name of journalism. And I think this feeds into the fake news narrative, no matter what side that you belong on.
People are gonna believe it just because they don't like Trump.
Exactly.
It's not gonna help.
I had Facebook friends sharing the article, and I can't just because they hated Trump, and that blind hatred led them to not even see if it's factual, to see if anybody has checked out the document.
I mean, it obviously
Right.
hurts CNN because Trump labeled them fake news. Someone take any questions
Yeah.
from them, which is
After
its own problem.
after all this, he put CNN on full blast during his press conference, and on that, I saw someone or a friend, I don't remember who it was, made a comment about the media needing to band together to stand against this. They were calling Trump a fascist, saying he's censoring the media, all this nonsense. And I strongly disagree, obviously. I think the media needs to come together and enforce journalistic standards. CNN needs to not be reporting on this nonsense BuzzFeed article that is completely unverified.
BuzzFeed, just why?
BuzzFeed.
People should not be getting their news from BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
CNN, Fox News, people are going to do that.
Mhm.
Fine. But just not BuzzFeed.
Yeah, like, seriously, anyone but BuzzFeed.
I put something on my
Well, don't go that far.
well-
I put something on my Twitter to where I shared BuzzFeed headlines. Which '90s show must go? Which Disney movie must
Yeah.
go?
I love the BuzzFeed quizzes, though. Like, let's be real.
What percent book obsessed are you? And
Why
this
do they
is
always use the what percent thing on like every type?
and
I
this
don't
is
understand.
and this is the website that people were trusting.
They're
For this,
clickbait.
yeah.
News.
well, obviously, but
One thing I do find necessarily concerning, I do actually see aspects of the fascism claim that the left makes in this particular case to be somewhat true.
Mhm.
Having Trump having the power just to label whatever he wants fake news, and people
Yeah.
agree with him,
that is
is
concerning.
very concerning.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's going to be a time come that he's actually going to do something. We want to actually pay attention to it, and he can label it fake news,
Right.
and
Just
there'll be no repercussions.
just
to it.
because he was justified in this case doesn't it sets a bad precedent. Arguably justified.
I mean, I just think it's a slippery slope. Once again, if it was showing the other foot, would we be okay with it? And the answer is no. Like, if Obama had labeled Fox News fake news, anyone taking any questions from Fox News, would we be okay with it? No, we wouldn't.
Some Democratic officials have in the past. I remember seeing a video. I'll try to find it for the link dump of city councilors in San Francisco saying that they wouldn't speak to Fox News, and that's irresponsible because Fox is so well established and they're widely watched. And we like to use the term mainstream media, but Fox is the definition of mainstream media. So my favorite response was during the press conference when Trump referred to BuzzFeed as a failing pile of garbage.
It's pretty accurate. I mean,
Yeah.
BuzzFeed itself is a pile of garbage. I disagree with the CNN sentiment, but like obviously, I think
I
BuzzFeed
agree.
itself is
Right.
actually fake news.
I regularly watch CNN, actually. I find that I like people like Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, Chris Cuomo. I think they're about as fair as you can find. Dana Bash. I think they're about as fair as you can find in mainstream media, as well as they don't force an opinion either way. They're going to have at least a balanced panel. They'll have a pro-Trump conservative, an anti-Trump conservative, somebody who was just a Bernie campaign worker, and somebody, a more established DNC official. Like, they're almost always in their panels. So I think they do a good job of putting forth different perspectives. And so the whole point behind the press conference was to address Russian hacking. And I realized this could be a topic for a podcast all on its own.
Yeah.
So let's take this as briefly as we possibly can. So certainly almost all of the U.S. intelligence officials agree that it happened. That's without a question. But whether or not it had a measured impact on the election is certainly debated. So and especially you cannot look at, like, there was no evidence of hacking polling machines, for example, but just the media campaign against the Democrats was fairly obvious. And from what I understand, Trump said yesterday that he informed Reince to have heightened cybersecurity measures of the GOP and the RNC to make sure that something like this did not happen to them.
I did find it interesting that a lot of Trump supporters and just people generally on the right that have very active political views or popular political views found that they openly expressed either on social media or through their own work that they were trusting the opinion of WikiLeaks more
Yes.
than they were their own intel opinions.
And I do want to talk about WikiLeaks, but does anybody else?
I don't think there's much debate that this had some impact on the election, at least some. I think all we've really had confirmed by intelligence is the Russians did some hacking. As to exactly what information they got and how they released it, we still don't know. I think it's still too soon to draw any conclusions or take any serious action other than further investigation.
And potentially heightened cybersecurity.
Obviously, that's
a given.
We should always be working to improve our cybersecurity.
And we spoke about Assange last time on the podcast. What we can say is, obviously Trump, in the past, he spoke something along the lines of, can't we use the death penalty on this guy, back in 2010? And I'm very worried about the embrace of Assange.
I mean, that's just been the overall sentiment.
Yeah, especially when he's on Sean Hannity and he keeps playing the interview night after night. It's worrisome because Assange had the reputation as being a vehement anti-American. He's been on Russian-sponsored state TV, and some people have even used the term anarchist, and I think that's probably correct.
I mean, what amazes me, I'm pro whistleblower personally, but what amazes me is that I've seen from 2010, Assange was the greatest thing, second coming of Christ, same with Edward Snowden. 2012, Republicans, with the peak of hatred of him when he released the Afghan war crimes documents, they absolutely despised him. I think you couldn't find a Republican that would say even remotely a nice thing about him. And now they just embraced him because he's now on their side, or on this one particular issue. And in 3 years, if he's going against national interest again under Trump, what is going to be the sentiment? Because we've already praised this guy as his hero.
Yeah,
and I know Rubio and Lindsey Graham have said this quite a bit, to where it could be us tomorrow. It could be the Republican Party that's hacked in 2018 or 2020.
Right. Assange, overall, I think we should be keeping him at a distance, keep him at arm's length. I think overall WikiLeaks provides a vital service in giving whistleblowers a platform to get information out to the public, but at the same time, you still need to be skeptical, and you need to keep an open mind and realize that, yes, this could be you tomorrow.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Right.
I just think it's interesting that we can people are actually praising this guy without realizing the repercussions. Like, he is not a partisan figure. He doesn't side with an ideology. If anything, he's a leftist ideology on a lot of interests.
Right.
He's pro-socialist, I think he is, personally. But he's not a partisan when it comes to his work. His record on this is fairly obvious. So the fact that we're siding with him partisanly as a American institution, almost like this is our guy for news and
that's
information,
dangerous.
is incredibly dangerous because he could change at any second.
Mm-hmm. I respect him for the lack of partisanship in the work he does. I mean, I do think that's respectable, but again, don't go getting too buddy-buddy with him because it could be the other side of the coin tomorrow.
And I know, just because we spoke about him being potentially leftist, even anarchist, I know that he spoke at Occupy rallies in London back in 2011, the biggest one that they had in London. And it's something, it's not going away. I think we're going to be talking about this for a while still, and it's something to keep an eye on. And so next week on our coverage, what we're going to focus on is Trump's first 100 days in office. And on the subject of whistleblower, and I know Kyle mentioned Edward Snowden, he's actually doing a video conference with Pitt students. Is anybody attending?
I'm going to report on it for us.
Okay, excellent.
I think he has almost like a lecture part in the beginning, and then it's like a free Q&A at the end with him.
Right.
What amazes me is this guy is still wanted for cyber terrorism in the United States. How is this allowed?
Yeah.
At an American institution?
We've spoken about this before. I'm not a huge Snowden fan.
It just amazes me how this, even if you're a fan of the guy or not, or you like what he does, or you like what he says, I just don't understand how somebody he's on the FBI most wanted list.
And
how can he talk to a college like this for a price or free or whatever?
Basically, they've never had to deal with this individual who is somewhere else. They know essentially kind of where he is, but they can't get to him. But he can still, through media, talk to people in the United States. I think it's kind of new territory.
I agree with that sentiment. I just don't understand how he can directly speak to an institution, how the government doesn't step in and be no, you can't talk to this guy. He's we want him as a criminal. He's a dangerous person because the government has that reach.
Do they even know?
They might not even know, but I would imagine they do.
Right.
I think it's been picked up by the local press.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's picked up by local press, I guarantee the federal government knows about this.
And I'm very excited to see how our reporting goes on it. Because if anything, with the paper, our best stories are the ones that are local news, can't even just campus-specific news,
Right.
and that's what really gets popular.
This really ties in both of our focuses, campus news and, national news, world news. My question is, has Snowden done anything like this before that we know of?
I believe he does.
I would guess so. I know that a documentary has been made. Well,
I don't know if he's talked to schools directly, like individual schools, but he's
similar
definitely
events.
He's definitely done events where he's like been projected on the screen, and he'll do like live talks to like a large group of people before. I don't know if he's done it at colleges before or not though. It seems baffling to me how this has been allowed.
Okay, so the next time we do a podcast, I think we'll definitely have to do a recap.
Yeah.
And potentially, I would even, if it's possible, to bring somebody on who would be more pro-Snowden than I am, just to sort of get a different perspective on the issue. We're doing something new in the podcast. We have our first guest on, Garrett Ziegler, and joining us for the interview will be Tim Nerozzi, our own managing editor.
How you doing?
Garrett, can you just give a quick introduction of yourself, why you're here, who you are, what you're studying?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I want to thank Marlo for having me on. It's a pleasure. Thank God we were born in 1996 and we can do things like this. I am a junior at St. Louis University. I met Marlo in Pittsburgh, actually, excuse me, last November through an ISI conference. And a quick shout out to ISI, if anybody's listening. Join the program, isi.org. It is it's the best thing I've done in my undergrad.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely agree.
I'm a junior at SLU. I'm studying economics. I am a man of Illinois. Apologies, along with California, Illinois is about the worst state in the be from. But anyways, I thought I'd come on and talk about in my humble opinion, the economic climate that could give rise to a demagogue like Trump, and also talk about the psychological component of being from a very, very small town in a world that has increasingly become dominated by Hollywood, people with Ivy League sheepskins, etc. So
fantastic.
So, I think a good thing to start off with would just be, can you tell us about your position on Trump?
So, I supported Cruz in the primaries. I think Trump at heart is a liberal Republican in the form of a Rockefeller Republican, if I'm not sure if you've heard that verbiage before. But I think Trump at heart, along with being a Rockefeller Republican, is a populist. That word has been thrown around a lot lately. It's hardly ever defined. I think the only way you kind of gather a coherent ideology out of Trump is he does what's popular. So in that way, in the most ironic way, Trump is a politician. He railed against politicians for over a year, but in reality, politicians do what's popular, not necessarily what's true or follow the laws of economics. My position on Trump is the conventional thinking that we've applied to the previous 44 presidents. Whether you're in the lane of Calvin Coolidge and you're kind of a free marketeer, laissez-faire, you let things, let the market adjudicate it, or you're in the vein of FDR where you're, intent on social engineering. The normal models, I guess, of analysis cannot be had with Trump. We live in a Twitter age. We live in an age where people can't focus on anything for more than 10 seconds. And so my position on Trump is, I think he's better than the alternative. I think Hillary Clinton has sold her soul to George Soros and all his cronies. And so I think that I have to be hopeful. I wrote in Mike Pence to answer your question directly. I wrote in Mike Pence. And so, if anything happens to Trump, we'll still be in
Mike
hands.
Pence, of all people, why Mike Pence as the write-in?
Well, a lot of people have a lot of different theories on voting, correct? Victor Davis Hanson out of the Hoover Institution, he's a classicist. He said he votes for people who are 51% more conservative, right? But I'm more along the vein of Ben Sass, and I know that really, really irks some people some of my friends to the right can't stand that. They think, they say, look at Hillary, and I know Hillary is evil. I know that, but Trump is a buffoon. And so, but I really love Mike Pence, but Mike Pence is not politically viable right now. He's too, to be really a conservative Christian, you've really got to walk a balance beam in today's culture, and that's what we're trying to change. I think the Trump's election can at least put a halt to the progressive assault. What did he say? I think he said at his thank you tour, which by the way was quite creative. I couldn't believe he was doing that. He said, "We're going to start saying Merry Christmas again." That is, have you ever like ran your fingernails over a chalkboard? That is what that sounds like to the left. To the secular left. Sorry, go ahead.
I think he truly missed campaigning. He missed the audiences. He missed the applause.
The rock stardom. You know?
And you could tell that he looked like himself again when he was in front of the audience. But I think your point about Trump truly being a politician is a good point, because he's no stranger to the political process. He's been buying and selling people on both sides of the aisle since Jimmy Carter. I think he donated to Carter back in '76. But furthermore,
that's ironic. The irony comes up again and again that his whole campaign, he changed positions a lot, right? We don't know what he's going to do with taxes, really. But one thing that was seminal to his campaign, and one of the best, fan-made videos I saw was it had this is stupid on the looking from the outside, but one of the hashtags was Trump the establishment, and that is the seminal piece to understanding this, is that he thinks the establishment has failed us. They've shipped our jobs to Mexico and China, and I alone, because I am of the system, can beat the system. It's quite fascinating.
So I want to thank you again for coming on. Can you give your background story with how you came to be on today?
Yeah, so I think the whole model of the post-World War II world is, if not coming to a close, it will change. And I'll try to give a picture of what I mean by the post-World War II world. The plan set forth by Woodrow Wilson after World War I ended, right, was a complete disaster. The League of Nations was kind of a failure on all fronts. The Weimar Republic went belly up. There was mass inflation. Hitler rose to power, and the whole thing kind of went to hell in a handbasket. And they said, okay, let's stop killing each other. We have to, the rational, civilized world has to get together, hold hands, and create a Marshall Plan, create NATO, create all these structures that have stopped another. Sure, we've had skirmishes. People have died. Thousands of people have died, but nothing like we've seen in World War II. They said never again will this slaughter of human life occur. And along with the military and geopolitical structures, there was an economic structure. So for 40 years, from 1945 to 1985, and it's important to note that America got in the lead here. That the winners of World War II, France, Britain, United States, of those winners, the U.S. was the only one who wasn't on its back, whose the fighting didn't occur there. What that meant was that our manufacturing and what I call meat and potatoes economy, not the world that we live in now of bytes, but physical atoms. We're talking, making steel, making cars, the real grimy stuff. We had a 10-year, 20-year lead on all these countries.
Absolutely.
And so you saw real standards of living rise. Women starting to go to work because they didn't have to do dishes. Sorry, I kept talking. You had a question there?
Oh no, I'm sorry. There's a delay between us, so forgive us if we talk over each other. But just you were touching on the history or that period where America was a sprint ahead, and I mean that resonates no clearer than here in Pittsburgh, where we were famous as a steel town for decades.
Exactly, and that gave you pride, right? There were all these. Now, I don't want to make the mistake of looking of being too concerned about economics. Economics can tell us 80% of the story, but it can never tell the whole story because economics it's only a means to an end. Economics is not the end, or it's not the good life. It's only a means to a good life. But what the economic climate provided was a way for normal humans. We're not talking about the elites. We're not talking about educated, highly educated people. We're talking about for normal people who completed the prescribed K-12 education. There were ample jobs and security, and there was status in your community, right? If you worked in the steel mill in 1957 and you were a 35-year-old man supporting 3 children and a wife, you were one of the good guys. Mm-hmm. You were someone who people looked up to. Mm-hmm. And now with with other countries catching up, and I don't want to go too far ahead because I want to kind of go through this chronologically because I think that's the best way to understand it. But not only have the economics changed in that people who graduate high school cannot just get normal jobs right away, but how we view blue-collar labor has completely changed, right? We've been fed this American dream that a life in a cubicle is necessarily better than a life with a hammer. And although for some people that's true, for a lot of people it's not. And so you have young people who could be very, very good tradesmen, skilled people, not motivated to go into those trades because there's a social stigma to it. And so it's a two-pronged, what I call, a two-pronged lie, in that to be educated and to have status is to work in an office, and then also the economic conditions to work with your hands have been completely deteriorated. So that's the picture I would want. That's how I would set it up. Is that the post World War II economic order of economic nationalism? Of course we've had freer trade, right? There's been demand as other countries have gotten into the middle classes, but that whole model is going into question. So
absolutely, yeah. No, I see what you're saying. And you touched on the the trades and these people that are being directed away from them when that would be where they thrive and where they could have the most success. And I mean, when you're talking about becoming a master plumber or a master carpenter, you're not looking at a couple. You're looking at a fat paycheck. You're looking at a major source of income.
And what I always tell people, the left loves to demean coal miners in particular. A coal miner's median salary readily approaches 6 figures.
If not surpasses.
Higher, yeah.
They get compensated for that dangerous work, right? And this is where the hypocrisies. If you try to understand the left's philosophy, it's so contradictory, and there's some contradictions in the conservative tradition. Absolutely. And I'll try to point those out in terms of free markets versus automation, etc. But the left is at every point in their economics, in their philosophy, is contradictory. For instance, the left wants complete liberation, right? Their version of the liberal arts is about liberating yourself from any sort of imposement, anything telling you what to do, instead of the classical view of the liberal arts was to make you master yourself, right? To not be cattle, to use reason to be able to make good judgments. But they want complete liberation. No, we don't want anybody telling us what to wear, who to sleep with, anything. But at the same time, they have, so at one end of the spectrum, they value self-autonomy. The self is all that matters. I want to be who I really am, right? Be who you want to be. But at the other end of the spectrum, which is so self-contradictory, is that they want government interference. Right? They want the government to give you a nice flat and a nice paycheck and food and shelter and healthcare. And so it's completely contradictory.
So round this all up for us then. So give us your big spiel here. How did this feed into Trump's election? How did a person like Trump become the president-elect?
And just as a spokesman to these people, to the people who've been forgotten. It's
absolutely. So a couple points. The first, I want to draw a distinction between, and I'm not just using this word because it's been used a lot in the last 6 months. You could smell this coming on with Brexit, etc. What you have are essentially people who are really educated, go to the elite institutions, have went to the best schools, are parents are professionals. They really believe in their mind that the nation state, what we conceive as America, France, Britain, is an antiquated idea. They think it is a 19th century invention by Otto von Bismarck, and they think that it's kind of old news, right? Borders, to them, borders are kind of antiquated. They don't believe that there's some differences between people of different nationalities. And so what do borders do? Borders are very matter of fact, right? Borders are very, they delineate what you can and cannot do. And the reason why they think that is because their lives do not depend on the effects of mass immigration and mass migration of people. For instance, if you're a partner at McKinsey & Company and you live in Brookline, Massachusetts, your interactions with illegal immigrants is very small. Mm-hmm. It's very small. Mm-hmm. You don't actually feel the effect because they're not going to steal your job. So if you're a part of the donor class, if you're a part of the professional class, it doesn't matter if illegal immigrants come in here, because that means you have a cheaper housemaid, a cheaper person fixing your car, etc., not realizing or not caring that your fellow citizens are being undercut, as Trump would say, bigly, by the people coming into the country. And so, sorry, go ahead.
And I recently read a book on Brexit, and one thing that they used Farage's victory speech, where he said this is a victory against big merchant banks, big politics, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you hinted at this, but the people within these institutions, they don't associate with people outside of their own institutions. And that's why something like the rise of Trump or the decision to leave the EU was so shocking, I think, because the people who were on the other side hadn't even considered the possibility, because they surround themselves with people who think the way they do and act the way they do.
Exactly, and that's why they're not liberals. Meaning that they're somebody like JFK, for instance, right? JFK today would be along the lines of a moderate Republican, say John Kasich.
I completely agree.
JFK is what you call a liberal. A liberal in the classical sense was somebody who wanted liberty, who wanted people to have liberty through responsibility, right, and self-sufficiency. Today we have a group of progressives, and so they're not really liberal because, like you said, they cocoon themselves into their little posh enclaves, shop at Whole Foods, and would be outraged if anybody was mad about an illegal alien hitting their mailbox, like a lot of people in the Central Valley of California experience on a daily basis. They just don't suffer the ramifications of their own ideology.
Mm-hmm. And so those that oppose their ideology, because they're not seeing the ill effects that these people are seeing, suddenly these people are the ones that are out of their mind, that are xenophobic, racist, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, or the famous one that I think really lost a percentage point was deplorable. Deplorable is such an ugly word because it has a connotation of completely lost, right? There's nothing we can do to save you. You're irredeemable. That is so indicative of the modern progressive, because the modern progressive doesn't think of nation states, like I say, meaning that the modern progressive if they're in the upper middle class, they have more solidarity, they have more in common, they feel more affinity for somebody in the upper middle class, say in London or Sydney or Hong Kong. And so they don't even care about their fellow citizens. They really don't. They want to feed the people in Appalachia opioids and have them die off.
And I think it's important to note that she said that half of Trump's supporters.
Yeah, so
is that the figure she used? Was like
she said.
Yeah,
she
said half are irredeemables and deplorables. There's
you could fit half, and the thing about that is that it's not even that she said there's a section of. When you start talking about 50%, suddenly any Trump supporter that's listening to the TV is now saying, she's probably trying to talk about me. She's probably lumping me in on that.
And the distinction I make, because people compared it to Romney's 47% mark, but that was in a private fundraiser to donors. This was at a live speech on TV in front of thousands of people. She knew that it would be heard.
And Romney was also speaking from like an actual factual statistical standpoint.
Yes, that's an undeniable fact.
Whereas Hillary was making like a like a value judgment on a group of people that made up, at least at that point, at least a quarter of the country at any given point when she made that speech. So I think you're right. I think that was at least a percentage point or two in the election. Absolutely.
No, and you're exactly right in that. I think what Romney said was wrong, and it hurt him. And I want to talk about the Mitt Romney class, because Mitt Romney is a part of this class I'm talking about. This McKinsey group that lives in Brookline and that doesn't really care about people in Indiana. But you're right. Mitt Romney's comment was not about people's character. It was about people who want to live off the government. That doesn't mean that you're irredeemable. Hillary was literally talking about the character of 30 million people. And what is the main job of the president? The job of the president is to protect the people of the United States. How can you protect someone when you really don't even care about them? She really doesn't. She doesn't care about the well-being of someone who doesn't adhere to her own political ideology.
And I think that was actually in one of the Podesta emails. That
she was growing tired of, quote, everyday Americans, was the line.
How despicable is that? Why would we want somebody who doesn't even like us to lead us? She really does. And it's so, it's like Obama when he was in Pennsylvania in 2007, or I think it was 2010, he said, they're gonna cling to their guns and their religion. There is a liberal condescension. It's seething through their rhetoric, through everything. And quite frankly, this is why I'm glad that Hillary won the nomination, because Bernie doesn't have this. Bernie doesn't. Bernie doesn't think that 30 million people are deplorable. He may think 5 of those 30 million people are racist, but he's not going to call them deplorable. He actually likes normal people. And so that's why I think Bernie would have been a much better candidate for the Democratic Party, but because the Clintons destroy everything they touch, and they're all about the Clintons, and they're terrible people,
So
they had to get the nomination.
So I hate to play too much into hypotheticals, but given your experience and your knowledge on this, do you think Bernie Sanders could have won the presidency if he were the nominee? Because I know in states like Wisconsin and Michigan, states that he won in the Democratic primary, there were many voters who voted for him in the primary but then jumped for Trump in the general.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of weird. I was just going to bring up those 3 states. Specifically, Michigan, I think you can... Ohio and Florida aren't going to be as important in 2020 as those 3 states. Historically it's been you got to win Ohio to win the presidency if you're a Republican, correct? I think it's going to be Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Yeah. And I think that Bernie would have won those states. And so this is such a testament, though, of the Clintons and their corruption and the Clinton machine is nihilistic. What I mean by that is they really don't care about anything but their own power and aggrandizement. This is so typical. I mean, it's like the hypothetical of, do you think Al Gore would have won the 2000 primary without Monica Lewinsky? And I think he would have. I really think, though, that the Clintons have put a taint. What Trump at a visceral level knew is that people could forgive his comments about women. I really think they could, but they cannot vote for somebody they don't trust. They can vote for somebody they think that's a buffoon and a narcissist, as we've seen, but they won't vote for somebody they can't trust. So that's where I stand on that. Yeah, absolutely, Bernie. But see, the Democrats are stupid, and they're not going to talk about. They're not going to let up with identity politics. So they're going to go with Booker in 2020. I think.
I think so too.
So let's jump forward a little bit here. We've talked enough about like the election as it happened, but moving forward now. I mean, obviously you're not a Trump fan. I think that it's fair to say that most ideological conservatives are at most entertained by and hopeful about Trump. I don't think many of them are, exceptionally happy that this is where we are, but they're exceptionally happy that Hillary is not president. So what are you thinking? How are you feeling now, representing this sort of area, speaking on behalf of this sort of area? How do you feel moving forward? What are you hoping for? What things are making you worry, or what things are making you hopeful?
No, absolutely. I would characterize I am rooting for Trump. Absolutely. It profits me none, or I'm not. What I cannot stand about the hardline Buckleyites is that I really think they care about their own conservative ideology more than they care about the well-being of the country. Meaning that what I care about most is that our people are 100 and or 310 or now 330. We don't know how many people in our country. That's how bad it is with the illegal immigrants, and some of them are great, some of them are terrible, as is everything. But what I want to see out of Trump is a more American conservatism. What I mean by that is American conservatism essentially at its core is about our documents, because we believe, American conservatives believe, that our documents are not perfect, they're not holy, right? They're not sacred documents, but they're about the best political documents in the history of man. And so if Trump can, in some way, through his tax reform, through his agency reform, the fourth estate of government has got to be cut. The regulatory agencies are out of control. And so if he does that, if he restores the legislative powers back to the Congress, if he restores the proper judicial restraint that has to happen to the Supreme Court, and if he can just only enforce the laws instead of what Obama calls, I have a pen and I have a phone, if he can bring it back to that, then we will be happy. And quite frankly, it has to be a focus on that. It has to be a focus on the Declaration of the Constitution. Because what? Because he is a flamboyant guy, and he wants attention, he wants to be popular. So we cannot get people who really want change, good change, an adherence to the Constitution. We can't be so worked up by, say, this Russia leak, right? Or today on Twitter he's saying, buy more LL Bean stuff, right?
Wait,
like,
what?
Wait, what? And we can't get all worked up in that, because that's just Trump. But we got to care about what he actually does.
Do you think what would you put the odds that he earns your vote in 2020?
95%. I mean, for him to not get my vote in 2020, there'd have to be, Rand Paul would have to become a Democrat and run for president. I mean, anybody that the Democrats are courting, what the Democrats, and one of my life goals, and I hope you don't edit this out, one of my life goals is to destroy the Democrat Party. By the age of 80, I hope they either form a new party, because it was founded in racism by Andrew Jackson. It's being led now by what I call new racists, which is, if 14% of the teachers in America aren't black, there's something wrong with it, because that's, the blacks are 14% of the population. They're not going to learn their lesson. They're not going to learn that identity politics is a wrong way to run a party. What people care about is the essentials. Am I going to have enough food to feed my kids? Can I give them health care? Can I make sure they learn? Those are the essentials, and although Trump does not adhere to traditional conservative ideology, which I don't believe conservatism shouldn't be an ideology, which I think it has become one, and that's part of the problem, is that it's kind of like, the Catholic Church circa 1530, where if you don't believe that free markets are everything in a bag of chips, and you're going to be, burned at the stake, I think, they're not going to learn their lesson, and they're going to put somebody, they're going to hold up signs, Latinas for Booker, women for Booker, right? It's just, that stuff is ridiculous, and it has to end. So that's what I think in 2020. I mean, if Trump delivers to the working classes through cronyism or not, because we know Trump knows a whole lot about cronyism. By cronyism, I mean giving tax cuts or giving tax incentives to companies, high tariffs. It doesn't matter to the people in Michigan. They do not care about the George Mason School of Economics if they do not have a job. They want to eat food. And so we know what the truth is, which is tariffs cause consumer prices to go up, right? We know this. But those people don't. And this is the inherent drawback of democracy. People think democracy is a great thing, and I think it is, but it's not an end in of itself, right? It should be just a means to a good life. But democracy is limited because people vote for their own interest, not respective of larger truths. So.
And I think what's so interesting about this trend for the Democratic Party is that it's been coming for a while, but just in 2012, Obama was able to connect with white working class voters very well in places like Iowa and places like Ohio, that he could go to small towns in Iowa that maybe Democrats could lose by 20 points, and he could bring it close. And that ability to have somebody like a Joe Biden, that ability has been severely depleted, if not non-existent, in the Democratic Party today.
No, because I think you saw Booker's testimony against Sessions was ridiculous. It was so unprofessional. I don't think Jeff Sessions is perfect. Maybe he had a couple bad decisions in the 80s, but he's not inherently racist. But what did Booker say in his testimony against him? He said, there is implicit bias, there's implicit racism in our justice system. What does that mean? What does that actually mean in English words? That means that Democrats, specifically Booker, think that we are inherently that there's something about us white people that's inherently racist. It's like, you can't even be, you get out of the womb, right, and you have this vendetta against black people, and they will lose. And I hope they lose till 2080, because if they keep up that train of thought, or that, the Democrats would kind of want the white population in the United States to go from 66 to 52.
So we only got a couple minutes left. Let's just do a quick, give me a little bit of a lightning round here and tell me, what are you looking for in the next couple months that you think will be setting us on the right track to success with Trump, whether we can wrangle him in or not? What are you looking for him to do?
Well, we have to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something that understands the law of economics. What does that mean specifically? The AMA, the American Medical Association, I was just talking with a pre-med student about this today, they have essentially created a monopoly, more or less, or an oligopoly in the medical market, which means that they limit the amount of doctors that can go through the med schools each year. That drives up costs, et cetera, et cetera. If they will let more people become doctors, the lower classes, the people who can only afford a certain, a little amount of health, or, cheap health care, doctors would come in and scoop up that market. It's like saying that because I own a cheap sports coat from Macy's, that just because I don't own one from Brooks Brothers means that we shouldn't have sport coats for people. No, what we know from economics is that the poor people, if you have latent demand, right, demand that's not being met, and you beef up the supply, the price is going to go down, and those poor people are going to be able to be serviced. Right now, they're not because they can't afford the market entry. And so healthcare has to be number one because that touches a lot of humans. Mm-hmm. Number two, I want him to address the tax code. It has to be simplified, and it has to be, in my opinion, since I'm a conservative, it has to be pro-marriage, and it cannot target small businesses. What they don't realize is that a lot of people who run small businesses file as individuals. They don't file as a business. Mm-hmm. That means their business income is taxed at that rate of a personal income. So they're paying 33% when they should be paying 15%. But to just end up, and I know we have maybe a minute more, but to kind of round up in summary what I talked about in terms of economics is that these views of globalism versus nationalism are irreconcilable. They will come to a head, and they came to a head in June with Brexit and in November with Trump. And what I mean by that is that people who run our government have to choose whether they care about Americans' well-being or whether they care about the laws of economics more. And that is a central question. And so we have to start rethinking our educational systems in terms of automation, which is going to, by 2030 at least, take up 5 million jobs. It's going to make a disruption we haven't even seen before. It's going to be like the Industrial Revolution to 17th century Europe, or specifically England. And we have, with Trump, I think there will be more conservative groups popping up, and it'll stop the absolute lunacy like it happened at your campus with extra credit. It will stop the absolute lunacy with the political correctness that has run amok, And so there are cultural implications, and there are also economic implications. And what I want, what I'll end with is just, Trump is not going to be perfect. Trump is a narcissist at a level we haven't seen before. But what his election signals that the West is not going to commit cultural suicide, that we're not going to let international banks and George Soros completely dictate our lives. And just the last thing, that the nation state, referenced in a lot of text, the Bible itself, is the best project we have come up with so far for human happiness. Mm-hmm. And if we abandon that, which a lot of people don't want to, in the false song of globalism, everybody's become less happy, because the security of the state's going to go down. People are going to be living by people who have different moral codes, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to thank you all. I know I went on a rampage here, but I hope this has been useful, and edit any of the times I stuttered or something.
No, we're very thankful you came on. And just before we wrap up, I think your points are excellent, and we're going to see this in multiple places. Just in December, we saw Italy vote no on the EU recommended referendums, and I would argue that's another step in this direction. Mm-hmm. And just in the next couple months, we're going to have the presidential election in France in the summer, the chancellor election in Germany, and I'm going to be curious to see where this goes next and how the trend keeps going. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and just one last comment about Islam, because that invariably in any of my conversations with people, it always comes up, right? Because the Trump's, Donald J. Trump is calling for a temporary ban on all Muslims coming in. He can't even pronounce the word right. But my opinion on this is simple, and this is so evident if everybody just would become more sober and look at it with an even head. Muslims are not a problem. The Muslim world, or the Muslim religion, Islam itself, is not a problem in Western liberal societies where we have democratic capitalism. If you look at any country where Islam is the dominant religion, what you'll find is less democratic institutions, more dogmatism, women not being able to do basic things like drive a car or hold a job, etc., etc. And so that is a factual, clear-eyed assessment of what what the situation is. And anybody who doesn't want to accept that, they literally live in a progressive, stateless illusion. And so, I think Sharia law and the U.S. Constitution cannot coexist if all of them are brought to a head. So that's what I'll say about that.
No, I think that's a great point to end it on, and I can't thank you enough for coming on, and I really hope you come on again in the future. I think
Absolutely.
We can have a lot of great discussions.
No, this is going to be a lot of fun, and in the future I won't try to take up all the time. I just wanted to get this economic point across. But thank you all.
No worries at all. We're very happy. And thank you for everyone tuning in, and we'll see you next week.